Well, first, I want to thank all of you for gathering here for our focus on education 10 years after Katrina. Lots of things have been happening in this city. It has not been quiet when it comes to education. We really wanted to focus on really what has been happening. Lots of discussion about charter schools and, of course, traditional schools. And is this the best way? What's happening because of transportation, all these issues. And so we wanted to assemble you to really have a deep and serious conversation about this and what is best really for the future of our children. But first off, what really jumps out at me, it's a very basic question. That is, I'll ask you different backgrounds, of course, civic, community, education, teachers, principals, you name it, you're all here. The question is very basic, and that is, are students better off educationally in New Orleans today than they were 10 years ago? Not all at once. Anybody can jump in and answer the question.
I mean, I will say absolutely, just from the standpoint of more people are going to college than ever before. Now we're up to about 60% of people in New Orleans, students are enrolled or enrolling into college. That's up about 20%. And 10% when you look at those who have gone to in-state colleges. So just in terms of the brass tacks, at the end of the day, we are trying to get people to go to college. More people are going.
And parents have choice now. Before it was just the traditional school. Now they have choice. They have traditional school, they have charter schools, they have options more than any time before.
And we have more students who are going to careers. They're going to technical colleges and they're looking at entrepreneurship. They're looking at coming out with certifications where they can have a meaningful life. So yes, we are doing better.
And I'd say just for civic engagement, just the number of people who typically did not engage in public education prior to the storm. They are digging in, they're paying attention, they're showing up at different meetings, they're serving on charter boards. So the diversity in terms of those who are actually engaging in public education looks very, very different than it did prior.
Okay, when you say it looks different, how so?
I can tell you just from a governance standpoint, the school leaders that we rely on to educate kids and get teachers ready, they have a lot more autonomy now than they did pre-Katrina. We have a school board now that is decentralized. We have...
now, first of all, when you say a school board, you really have two school systems.
We do have two school systems, but the Orleans Parish School Board now doesn't engage in the day-to-day activities of determine who gets hired or fired by staff now. That's up to the principals to do that. They don't have to go up the administrative chain of command as they used to.
So before you had central office that was determining a lot of that, as opposed to having principals in those individual schools making those decisions.
Yeah, you had a huge bureaucracy before, and it was top heavy. Well, it's flipped now. It's more from the ground up now. The school leaders have the autonomy to do what they need to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that our kids are educated, as well as the principals.
And one of the things was, before the storm, as an administrator, if a board president or superintendent decided that this was the approach we're going to use, and that was the approach that was used for all schools, compared to now that, you know, we use our data and we decide what's best for the children that we serve in our building. So that speaks to just what this gentleman was saying about, you know, we have the autonomy to make those decisions, whereas before we didn't.
And so it's very interesting because when you look at various reports and folks say New Orleans is going to this sort of all charter system all across the school district, you had lots of critics who were folks who were saying this is the wrong thing you should be doing. Others were saying you should be experimenting, trying different things. And what for me is always, as someone who has always been a school choice supporter, I went to magnet schools when I was in Houston. For me, what I understood was at the end of the day, what is best for the child. But that was also interesting though, is that you hear folks who always say it's important to have local control in order to have local voices. And what I'm hearing from a lot of you is that you have that, but you still have the folks who say, well, it's still not enough. And so what have been some of the biggest mistakes that you have seen with this new approach to education in New Orleans?
The way it was done.
Say it again?
Just the way it was done.
When we say the way it was done.
The way it was done, it did not, from the beginning at the outset when the storm hit, changes were implemented without bringing a lot of people to the table to have that level of input from a diverse group of constituents.
And what kind of changes are we talking about?
to the entire structure.
Well,
I mean,
can I make a to the well? I have a different view about the way it was done.
That's fine.
And this notion that it was done to them and not with them, and that's what we've been hearing a lot. What we have to do is take a step back and look at and understand exactly where we were as a city during that time, right after the storm. I was an elected official. We were right in the midst of it. We were right in the midst of seeing families, hundreds and thousands of families who were dispersed all over this country. The teachers, administrators, principals dispersed all over this country. And so
you basically had no system.
we had no system, but we had no people. The very people who today who are back, who were saying, you guys made all of these changes without us, those were the same people who were saying, we're not coming back unless we see progress. So decisions at that time had to be made. Decisions had to be made, or we would still be waiting for people to come back.
And this is the difference. 2 years after that, you still saw a lot of the same reformers getting charter applications when local or nonprofits, alumni groups were not getting charter applications. The teacher workforce looked very different. It was largely white because we entered in a contract with Teach for America, and at the time they generally have white teachers. And so the point of any education reform is to empower a community. You're not going to improving a school system in spite of the community. And so you're right in the sense of there was a period of time we needed new people, we needed new ideas, we needed to make decisions. But 2 years after that, 3 years after that, you got to start building capacity of local talent.
I can agree with that, but
Go
a
ahead.
lot of the decisions, I agree 100% with that it got to a time when there should have been more inclusion on additional decisions. But what you're talking about is that decisions to turn the schools over to charters were made when half of the community was not in the city. And we didn't have the magic, the crystal ball to determine who was going to come back when. So some very basic decisions had been made about what this school system was going to look like.
So first of all, who made the call and why did they make that call?
Explain that.
You just said the decision was made to go to an all-charter school system.
And I think, Patrick,
Just
Gilbert,
curious.
I think you would be the perfect person to be able to explain what happened.
Senator
Well,
Patrick,
let me,
the
yeah,
history.
well, let me
history-
say this.
the history of it.
Right, the history of it. But let me say this in terms of not having the workforce. You have to, being a displaced employee, you have to understand what the message was, that we don't want you back. So you had people, number one, displaced, no place to live, and then other people who were given an incentive to move here, housing allowances or whatever, but as a native, I wasn't eligible. So, and to Andre's point, 2 years later, then we come home after we struggled to get back home, and certainly were employed all over the country, and many of us employed where people didn't want us to leave because we were that good. But then we come back home and we are still not recognized as leaders.
Right.
We were still struggling, making charter applications, those of us who did, turned down for, many various reasons. Some probably for good reasons, some maybe not, that's to be questioned. But when you talk about the workforce and coming back, the messaging wasn't there for the employees to actually come home.
I think, the decisions that were made from the State Department of Education, the Recovery School District was created in 2003.
Right.
And the initial thought was they would take over a few schools in New Orleans and then sort of take on schools as they saw fit. And as Senator Duplessis had pointed out too, is that, the city was literally and figuratively washed away. And so it was a matter of a starting point in how to get schools running. And I believe it was around November of 2005 when the decision, some leaders that were coming back said that, look, we want to use a charter mechanism in order to get schools started in Algiers. And I know Dr. Lewis was, if he wasn't back at that time with the Algiers Association getting started, that was like the beginning of just a set group of charters that were just trying to open up that next spring. And what happened was from that, I've never been privy to any like meetings or conversations that say, well, definitively we're going to be our charter. What happened was charter was the mechanism that allowed schools to open a little bit more quickly than in a traditional sense. And what we've seen happen over the last 7 to 8 years is just a growth of a charter sector that's been buoyed by a very strong, just a strong accountability system, one that affords autonomy to school leaders and brings a lot of choice. And the biggest thing is when we talk about just like starting the schools, like those people who have the privilege to even apply for a charter, and then ultimately, if they're successful in getting one, our authorizing of charters has been very strong. And so early on, it was a lot of people who were ready right at the moment's notice to come in and start applying and running schools. And as Sameta pointed out, a couple of years after that, people were coming back to the city and they were like, hey, okay, I want to be able to apply for running schools. And they applied to the state. Some applicants were strong, some were weak and didn't get approved. But I think over the last 7 years, that process has improved. The number of people have significantly increased to be empowered. Over half of our CMOs or charter leaders are African American. Our workforce is diverse. And I think it's what's happening in New Orleans has been pretty much organic. We've been sort of building this as we go. You have to keep in mind, after the horrors of Katrina, we're talking about a devastation that was just something our nation hadn't seen before. And we were literally just in recovery mode. Everything was triaged for a number of years. Yes. And then as the system started to stabilize, 2 years in, 3 years in, people then started to be able to like really voice their concerns and started looking at those things that, again, that some people characterize as being done to them and more being done with them. And so we evolved from just assigning charter operators to certain school buildings to today we have a community process that's very transparent, where there's a lot of feedback from a community panel, from community groups, from parents and families that make recommendations ultimately to the state when we ultimately decide who will operate a school.
So I said it earlier, you have two systems here. You have Orleans Parish
School board.
School board, and then you have the Recovery School District.
Correct.
All right. So how many schools, Orleans Parish, how many schools do they control?
24.
24.
Yes, we currently have 24
Are
schools.
all those charters?
6 of those schools at this time are the direct run, which we call network schools at this time. The remainder are charters.
Okay, so what is a direct run school? What is that? A traditional school?
So a traditional school, yes.
Okay, all right. So and then you have the Recovery School District. Who controls that? The state. So you have a system where you have the state who's really running majority of the schools. And how many schools the Recovery School District controls?
57.
All right. So who are they accountable to?
The charters are accountable to the state board and really to the students and families. Each charter enters into an initial 5-year contract where they set their goals and say we're going to be financially stable. We're going to move this school from an F to a D in the first 5 years, and then the next 5 years from a D to a C. And they have these benchmarks. They have a charter school compact that every organization signs, and they're held accountable by the state to meet those measures.
So one of you made the point earlier that in terms of you have seen improvements. Folks have done different studies, things along those lines. How's improvement being measured? Because so how do you compare today to 10 years ago when today looks nothing like 10 years ago? So how is that an accurate measurement?
Roland, I brought some statistics.
Go ahead.
My name is Mike Desatel. I'm an independent education blogger and a researcher, and I'm presenting at a conference tomorrow on the same subject of the New Orleans Recovery District. And what I try to do, you're exactly right. It's impossible to try to put it back together and really compare apples to apples because so many of the schools have changed and so on. So what I did instead was I looked at the state test scores in 4 areas, math, English, social studies, and science, and got an average for the state and an average for the entire recovery district, not the New Orleans school system, but just the recovery district, the part that was taken over. And we did an analysis, and the state also has done the same analysis, and what we ended up with was that this recovery district falls at the 17th percentile in ranking amongst the 72 school systems in the state.
Now, folks who speak English, just explain that in English.
That means that 83% of all the other school systems, their students are performing somewhat better or a lot better or somewhere. This is where they fall in the ranking, is at the 17th out of 100. 17 out of 100 is where the recovery district as a whole is falling.
And where are you comparing year to year? Or are you comparing again?
No, we looked at the end result at the latest data that we have, the very latest data that we have, which was at the end of the last school year, not this school year, but the one before. and looked at those test scores and compared them to the rest of the state.
Okay.
In addition, Roland.
Progress from where we came from, you actually have to look at all the students in New Orleans. You can't just take the Recovery School District. Those were all failing schools in 2005. You have to compare.
I disagree with that. They weren't all failing schools.
So,
At least 25 schools that were taken over were just somewhat below the state average, and there was a special law passed that allowed the state to take over any school in New Orleans that was below the state average. So they were not necessarily all failing.
even so, how would you compare New Orleans' performance pre-Katrina with now, unless you took all the students in New Orleans and compared them to all the students in New Orleans now?
No,
How
but-
would
but
you compare
there
progress?
There are rates that we look at, and you are right in this regard. We're clearly progressing, but as a district, we're still far behind where we want to be. Remember, this is one of the lowest performing states in the union, and historically, New Orleans represented one of the lowest districts in the union.
I want to back that up. Go
Right
ahead.
now, but I would always say that for black folk in this city, they are making gains. When you hear the attacks on reform, it's all about reform. But black families, by and large, are going to ultimately going to college at a higher rate. The graduation rate is improving, and I'm clear about it. It is not where we want to be. 70-something% is not good. But this idea that somehow you're saying that because we're at the 17th percentile, we should do away with this, when in fact...
Well, here's the question, though. But you didn't say do away with it. Now, do you?
I'm just giving you the results of
Right.
my study.
Gotcha.
And
And
that's a
there
good
are
point.
two other categories, by the way.
But here's what jumps out at me. To me, I would say it's a waste of time to compare what's happening today to 10 years ago. I would. Because to me, what makes more sense is compare today to 5 years ago, and then 4 years and 3 and 2 years, because at the end of the day, you actually want to show progress. I mean, if this was sports, nobody is comparing the team's record today to 5 years ago. They're saying that you make the playoffs last year, or you make the playoffs this year. And so I sort of get the sense that this whole back and forth between 10 years ago, pre-Katrina, and today is a continuation of the political games in terms of the people who don't like certain things that have happened. And so how are you trying to change that conversation? And also certainly want to hear from some parents as well. So go ahead, what's your comment?
I just want to say, I think you hit the nail on it. Well, I think a lot of what you said is right. First of all, the RSD has been the whipping boy in the community for a long time. And it's a disingenuous argument to say that the RSD has failed us. We never should have had an RSD. We have been failing in education as a system, not in the individual people. The true comparison of where we are today in education, go back to 30 years ago. When I finished high school in 1991, you only had 5 high schools in the city, probably serving 100,000 high school age kids. If you didn't get in one of those 5, maybe 6 high schools, the chances of you having a positive outcome in life were slim to none. Now, don't get me wrong, there was exceptions. There was exceptions to the rule. But if you didn't get in a magnet high school, a selective admission high school, you had to go to private school. And if your parents couldn't afford private school, the chances of you having a successful outcome in life was slim. That's the comparison. Everybody wants to say, Katrina, we were all underwater. I lived out of my truck for 3 weeks. Right. That's an unfair comparison that everybody who's outside of the city want to make. We were rebuilding more than just schools. Right. We had community meetings on neighborhoods, where to plant a tree. We had neighborhood meetings on everything you can think of. Where to build a house.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to talk about Katrina. The true measure of where we've come from in education is from 30 years ago to today, not Katrina.
I agree in about what many people said, but I think part of the issue from my perspective is just as there is potentially too much comparison to what happened 10 years ago to what happened now, there's, I think, not enough emphasis on the way things really are right now. And these absolute scores, the things that Michael's talking about, with regard to ACT, for example. I mean, the average ACT score in New Orleans schools is really, really low. So low that it's lower than the threshold of getting into LSU. And so I don't think that's an argument to go back to the way things were. I think that's also a straw man that lots of people say is, you know, okay, so you don't like it now, the only other option is the way it was. There are other options, but if we're not honest about the way things are right now, then we can't move forward. We can't figure out why is it still low, and how do we get that to a point where kids can really go to college, and not just state schools, but you know, private schools and other schools out of state, and how do we get there? But if we don't ever talk about the fact that that's where it is, if all of the conversation is about we're getting better, yes, it's getting better incrementally, it's, you know, it's happening very slowly, then I think we miss some of that conversation about the way it is.
Well, so here's the question I have for you then. So you're looking at ACT scores. Are ACT scores in 2015 better than they were in 13, 12, 11, and 10?
I don't think.
Yes.
Demonstrably.
Yes, they are.
They've
Marked
increased,
by
they've
a-
increased
by
their-
about-
For the whole state, too.
0.1,
And they're
maybe?
improving at
Point-
twice the rate of the
0.2.
state.
Small
Okay,
change.
1 second. Say it again.
They're improving at twice the rate of the state. I do think that we can't congratulate ourselves on a job well done and be done with it. Those of us who work in schools spend every day talking about 65% is awesome, but it's not enough. 33% passed tests before the storm. It's 69% in 2013. That's great, but we have so much work to do.
But here's why, for me again, I am trying to understand the critique. And that is, wife was an educator, my brother, 3 sisters. I have aunts and uncles as well. If I look at a grocery store has a 2% profit margin. That's it, 2%. That's right. When I look at other industries, I mean, you talk about small profit margins. And the reality becomes education, you can't necessarily talk about improvements when you're dealing with feeder systems. When you had systems where literally you went to elementary schools that failed, middle schools that failed, and high schools that failed, and then also you're taking students, so the question is, are they coming into kindergarten, first grade? How many words do they know? What is actually being done there? And so I just think naturally you're going to have incremental gains. The question still comes back to, are you having gains or no gains? Are you getting better, or are you getting worse? And that really seems to jump out at me. And I'm curious to know from being parents and students here, your experience going through this, and do you believe that this current system is what's best for your children and for students? Is this also best for you? And what do you want to see educators, adults, administrators, what should they know about this current system?
Well, I want to speak on something that I feel like hasn't really been mentioned tonight. The fact that everybody's talking about data and how we're improving as far as the data is concerned, but with, to my recollection, the unemployment rate for black men in the city is still 52%. The crime rate is still worse than, I don't know, maybe when Katrina was happening or before the storm or whatever. And the fact that the data may be improving, the system is still terrible because the students are coming out, and I want to speak on the black kids. You know, it's predominantly black city, predominantly black public schools, and there are too few and far between black women and men teachers. I feel like the system would get better if the charter schools have more black teachers in them, because the fact that this is a predominantly black city.
Yeah, but the reality is across the country, what you have, especially when it comes to black men, you have very few black male teachers. Right. And so and that is certainly a systemic issue. And I think also when you talk about the issue of crime, when you talk about unemployment, all of these things go hand in hand. And if you have generationally an education system that failed students, they become failed adults. Right. Failed adults then rely on a system, and so the cycle sort of repeats itself. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I feel like this. I grew up in the Lower Ninth Ward, and as you stated, I have a family who are teachers and everything else, and I went to a failing school, but at home, I was taught you don't do what the community does. You have to be better than that. So I went to a failing school.
Now, who was at home?
My grandmother, my dad, my mom. You know, my mom and dad went to high school.
And were they educated?
They went to high school and they went to some college. They didn't finish. I'm the oldest and I finished.
So if I had to do a census of the folks who grew up in your age bracket, would they have that same story?
No. But see, the difference is, and I let people know, like when the storm hit, I was a graduating senior at Grambling. And I was sitting there watching the news just like everyone else. And I was actually hurt to hear people call us refugees when I'm sitting here and I was born here. And I'm sitting here in the classroom just like y'all. No different. Trying to get my education. And you're sitting here acting like everybody's out here just acting crazy. Which it was not true. But I don't have the typical situation. But I also have a situation where my son was put in a failing school. And he's a straight A student. And I've tried every...
Now, when you say he was put in a failing school, what does that mean?
I filled out the one app, and there's a clause that states if your child is not getting the schools that you apply for, they go back to their feeder schools. And he was actually, when he started kindergarten, he was put in a school that was out of my district, that was not in my neighborhood. And I felt that a problem because he's 5. So why would I send him to school all the way across the river, like 30 minutes away when he's 5? So I had to go to the school board and literally sit there for hours to get him to go into a school in my neighborhood, which was a failing school at that time. And they told me that I can apply through the one app to get him into a different school. And still, 4 years later, he was still put back in the same school.
Now, later we're going to talk, because I want to go in depth when it comes to one app and also on that issue. But I want to deal with that point, because this is what I find to be interesting. And I'll ask it this way. How many of you work more than 10 minutes from where you live? Raise your hand. How many of you will shop more than 10 minutes from where you live?
Oh.
Follow me, I'm going somewhere.
Don't get it started, brother.
How many of you want to go out and you want to enjoy yourself for dinner, you want to go to a movie, is 10 minutes from where you live?
Please.
Now, here's what I find to be interesting. We will work, we will drive or get on the bus or call a friend to go work somewhere, to eat somewhere, to entertain somewhere, to go clubbing somewhere, to go watch a movie somewhere. But when it comes to actually the education of our children, we somehow want it to be literally right around the corner.
Yep. Well, I feel like he was, at that time, 5. I feel like this. Certain things that all his parents had was good. I feel like at a certain age, you should be in your neighborhood. And where I live, there's good schools.
But here's my question. Was it a failing school under Orleans Parish?
When he was, the first school, the initial school?
No. I mean, again, he's 5. So he's only been around 5 years. So the option that you had available was that school, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the only option that was available.
It was a D school.
The point I'm raising is, and I understand he's 5, but if I have a choice between making sure that my child is positioned for their future, for life, 30, 45 minutes, take your shot. And because I think a lot of times we want the convenience, and I think for a lot of us, look, I grew up with a neighborhood school. But I remember going to a magnet school, and I got on that bus. I rode a bus from the 3rd grade, from the 4th grade, all the way through a senior in college. And I'm telling you right now, I ain't got a problem riding the bus. Because if getting on that bus ensures I'm going to be able to have a job, to be able to create wealth, to be able to take care of my family, I say I'm going to get on that bus every single year. And so it's part of this discussion also. Well, I hear from a lot of critics that folks have gotten so used to an old system where it was around the corner, and this is forcing people to have to operate in a whole new world and a whole new dynamic that frankly is different from the way they went to school.
Right.
Go ahead. Y'all can jump in. You can go right here and I'll come back up to you.
My kids go to 3 different schools. One's a Catholic school, 2 are Orleans Parish directly ran, and I live in New Orleans East.
So you pay for one of your kids to go to a school. You say the Catholic school.
She's on a Louisiana voucher.
Okay,
program.
all right, gotcha.
So honestly, she was in, the oldest one who's in high school now, was in a charter school, and I still would have to drive. But I get Isis' point. Her point is, if there's a school that's right there, that's tangible to her child, why can't he go there when she has to go so far away? And I get to your point. If I drive 40 minutes because that is the best option. And if it was 45 minutes or 50 minutes, I would drive to the school because that's the best fit and the best option for my kids.
Go ahead. Yeah, again, any of y'all can jump in. You don't need me to call on you. Go ahead.
Just once again, I just wanted to elaborate on what you were saying about comparing to, we can go out to restaurants that's, out of our way or whatever, but when it comes down to the children, we're looking for convenience. That's not necessarily from every parent's perspective. I think that now, just elaborating on some things that I heard earlier, the parents now have a choice because we're introduced to certain programs such as bail or the STOP program, things of that nature, that helps us to make a choice as parents. Back in the day, like Ms. Isis said, we did have the schools to where whichever school was in the district, we had to attend that school.
Or wherever you live. So it
Right,
was a zone.
or wherever you live.
You lived in this neighborhood. This was your elementary
Right.
school, your junior high, your high school.
Yes, sir.
And you had no option.
Yes, sir. And I'm not basing this off of pre-Katrina. Just basically all in general, we've always had the reputation all the way to statistics having very, very low grades, very few people to graduate just from out of not just high school, but middle school. You had middle school dropouts. Right. Now we have a choice. With my, I have 2 children, 9 and 12. One's in private, one's in charter. Us as parents, just once again from a parent's perspective, I believe that now we have more options to step up for our children, and that it takes not just the teachers and not just the powers that be, but the parents as well. I agree with you. My son's school is maybe 15, 20 minutes away from me, but I don't care how far it is. If that's the school for him, if he's going to be known as an individual so they can prepare him as an individual for this world, then yes, I'm going to go out that way. When it comes down to the old system versus the new system, Rome was not built in a day. And I am a native of New Orleans, and I applaud my city for all of the things that we have been through. And you have representatives that are telling you, hey, these are the resources that we have. And we had no choice at that time because we didn't have the certain amount of people in the city. Mind you, it wasn't just the education that Ms. Duplessis was just elaborating on earlier. There was also families, like this young gentleman was saying. There was crime that was going on in the city. So it was so many things and so many hats that people were wearing. And if you think about it, it was because we came together as a city that you see our graduates, you see more graduates graduating from middle school, from high school. You're getting Congress people, people in the White House that represents the state of Louisiana or New Orleans. You don't have to be a product of your environment. Everything is not Florida Lee, city of New Orleans. It's more to it than Bourbon Street and, the Big Easy, Lazy Les Bon Ton Roulette. We have schools that we're trying to rebuild, families within those schools that are trying to rebuild. It's way more to it. But based on just the distance, the resources, I think that it's a major improvement, and I'm more than proud of my city.
I'd like to say something as
Go
a
ahead,
parent, a teacher,
and
an advocate.
A spoken word all of a sudden? All right, go ahead.
But you mentioned, I was educated, I'm a native of New Orleans, educated throughout my entire life, kindergarten through college. Went to school outside of my neighborhood, went to a citywide access school for middle school. Very different, was modeled what was supposed to be.
Citywide access school, what is that?
So it's a CY school. So here's a school where they pull kids. They pull kids from across the city. I grew up in a housing project for half of my life.
You had to apply to get into the school?
No, well, not really apply. At the time, the school needed to expand, so they needed a group of students, a certain population of students. So it was like a thing if my mom heard somebody say, okay, like one of her friends, oh, there's a spot at the school, are you interested? Your kids, what have you. So that's how we got in. So it wasn't like an application process, only because of the nature of the school needing to get more students, right? So went to that school, also went to a magnet school, I guess you would say, high school. So I didn't go to schools like in my neighborhood, except for like elementary school, which was like pretty much the housing project has schools like right in the neighborhood where you can walk to. So there were opportunities where kids went to schools outside of their school districts or outside of their zip codes.
But you shouldn't have to travel. The problem is that there's not an option.
I need to finish, but we had an option, right? So as a parent, I was told that I had choice. I did not have choice. My choice, okay, wait, by definition, I had a choice. But if my choice is between a D and an F schools, then what kind of choice do I have for my high school student who I want to see graduate in 4 years and go to college and receive TOPS, and I don't have to take out a direct plus loan like I do today, right? And so I still had to do I still did what I could do as a parent to make sure that he was prepared, but he ended up going into, I think at the time of school, was a D school. And that was through a connection. So, and I've gotten promises from all sorts of people that I would get my kid into the school that they wanted to. A choice, my choice, which he never got into. And I pulled all types of, whatever, my connections that I knew. Hookups, and it didn't work, it didn't happen. So I don't know if that's a false sense of what choice is. And I'll say as a teacher, a school teacher, over the past 2 years, I taught students who were 2 and 3 grade levels behind. So these are students, 5th grade, who entered into this particular school district post-Katrina. So I don't know, again, how we're measuring success, but I don't think that's, like successful when 50% of my kids in front of me are 2 and 3 grade levels behind. So there's an issue right there. And also the high level of turnover with teachers. One, you have to have consistency. When you're creating a culture within a school, you have to have, that is part of the foundation of making sure a school is successful. My cousin, had a conversation with her last week. She said, I'm taking my kid out to school. I said, why? He had 4 teachers in 1 school year. I've witnessed this as a school teacher over the past 2 years. So, what you were saying, like, it's okay to talk about all the great gains we've made, but let's have a real conversation of how our kids are being impacted. This young man on the end talked about kids who we call opportunity kids. Those kids were pushed out or dropped out or failed out of this school system that was not equipped to teach them. And as a way of turning around a school, let's say I received a charter 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I could take a school where kids may have been kindergarten through 5th grade, but I can open my school with kindergarten and 1st grade only. Where do you think those 3rd through 5th grade students went? So for every school that was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but every school that was in this particular system of turning around, those kids had to then be pushed to another building or facility, right? So eventually you find kids there again, that inconsistency, right? Inconsistency, and you have kids who fell through the cracks. And some people will say, and I've been told that, in order for this to work, some kids will fall through the cracks. But there you have our 52% of opportunity youth or people, and you have crime that's still high. I mean, you have all these different issues that are taking place within our city. So let's stop talking about how great this is and how this should be put on as a model for other cities.
Roland,
the data shows.
It's a crack today. 30 years ago, it was the Grand Canyon.
But that's across the country.
It's a crack today. I agree. It's not perfect. I'm sorry, Howard, because I know his model works. It's a crack today. It was Grand Canyon 30 years ago.
It's not much better.
Go ahead.
I just want to chime in a little bit, and I do have an appreciation for what the parents are saying, and I do understand where you're coming from, but I am a product of New Orleans public school system. But I got to tell you, what happened then was I had to get up on a Saturday morning, take an hour and 5-minute bus ride. My mom prayed on that ride that I got into Warren Easton, because at the time, the brand new building, the brand new shiny nickel was Sarah T. Reed, and everybody wanted their child in that school because it was brand new. They judged the success on the size and the newness of the building. And guess what happened? A brand new shiny nickel is just that. It gets dirty, and then when you get to playing with it, it loses its luster. And my mom made sure I got into Warren Easton that I had to test into. So quite frankly, it wasn't an open admission school, and that was only because there wasn't enough of those kinds of schools. Well, I think that's the same thing with CMOs. I think you have a whole lot of CMOs, and I think you have some that are doing some phenomenal, some charter management organizations that are doing
acronyms like everybody watching at home know what y'all talking about.
So I think you have some phenomenal CMOs that are doing some great work. Yep. And I think they don't have enough schools to replicate. So stop replicating failure and replicate success. I'm a part of an Inspire NOLA charter management organization that has proven it is successful, not just because we vet our teachers, not just because we're providing quality training, but we understand the citizens and their parents in New Orleans. I am a proponent of, and I believe rather, that you give a parent a choice, let them do their investigation, let them do their own homework, and decide where their child needs to go. And I think if they say, Mr. Clay, I'm gonna have my kid get up 30, 45 minutes because I don't want them to go to the school around a corner that is dilapidated, it's not safe, and they're labeling my child uneducable. I'm sorry. Let me just finish my thought. And what I'm saying here is this. I think at some point, if we were honest, just like we were a minute ago, we would do everything else in distance. Why wouldn't we allow for a parent who has their own kids to raise to say, you know what, it's the sacrifice I want to make for my kids? How do you get to tell a parent that they are wrong for wanting to travel? And let me say this. I don't think any of us are in the position to tell a parent what's best for their kid. Not someone sitting in a district, not someone who's sitting across town. I think a parent who does their own homework deserves the right to get in a quality school. And let me say this, I believe we should grow other schools. I believe we should partner with those schools. But let's be honest, right? I grew up in the Calliope, and excuse me, that's Tulane, the Callio Project, right? All right? And so from the Callio or the Yo all the way to the Ninth Ward, it has always existed that we are divided because of boundary lines and wards. And we need to cross the same issues and cross over to bring ourselves together when it comes down to education and providing the resources. What makes us successful isn't a secret. I always invite folk into Etna-Carr High School. Why? Because I want all of our kids to have an opportunity to a quality education. And I'll say this quite frankly, they don't have that. They don't have that. You're seeing failing CMOs replicate failure. So I am excited to see folk crossing over party lines, if you would, to educate the citizens, our kids, our future of tomorrow. Because quite frankly, if we don't come together, it's the same soup warmed over.
I guess I was just speaking to what you really answered it, that, you know, when you talked about kids having to travel out of their neighborhoods to go to school, I believe in neighborhood schools. I worked in the lower Ninth Ward for years, and while we might be what you call deemed a failing school, and I hate those labels that we put on schools. I'm working at a school now, we work very hard every day. Every adult in that building is committed to kids, but because of test scores, we're deemed somewhat failing school.
No, hold on. Let's be honest, okay? At some point, you got to call it what it is, okay? Because in every other field in the world, if something is failing, we call it failing. But only in education do we want to sort of do a soft shoe, because at the end of the day, if that young man or young woman can't read, can't write, can't do math, guess what? We fail them. So we got to call it something.
But even with that being said, should a parent have to travel, a child have to get up at 5:45 a.m. to travel to another failing school?
Well, and again, and I think that's part of the issue here when you talk about the issue of how do you deal with education. And I think what we have done in this country, folks who I've known in this city for years, we have accepted failure as the norm. And so to your point, which has always been my point, which is why when it comes to me being a supporter of school choice, I don't care how you educate. I believe in public, private, charter, magnet, voucher, homeschool, online school. I don't care. That's because, but I have one standard. Quality. Does it work? And if it works, I'm down with it. And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in, well, it looks like this, it looks like that, and that to me is where we sort of get in trouble.
But it's not a question of should we have choice? Yes, we should have choice. We're forced into having to travel. There's not enough quality schools. And so the issue is not about should we have these wonderful options. what the parents are speaking to, and this is real, there's only a certain number of slots for the A schools, and those are the schools parents want.
Yeah, but you know what, Andre, we also have to account that, honestly, parents consider a number of factors when they make choices, right? And so the Urban League, we do a ton of research and work with parents about why they choose and how they're choosing. It is, yes, a big factor is performance, but we're also considering distance. They're considering extracurricular activities. They're considering before care, after school care.
Breakfast.
They're considering breakfast programs. They're considering music and
Is it a new building?
Is it the facilities? It's a host of things. Is it medical health? Do they have a nurse in the school? What's their special education program look like? I mean, there's a ton of things that go into how a parent chooses. And so what we always say is you have to give them the information and respect choice. What you hear is that, again, to Andre's point, there are just still not enough options, quality options.
And as you listen,
So the real question is, do you actually, I do a show of hands and then we can get you can get into answer it. How many of you actually believe that there is real choice in New Orleans? Raise your hand. And how many of you believe that it's called choice, but you really don't have choices as to where your kids are going to go?
You don't have a choice, only because it's, Andre, what you hear, the passion you hear from the parents and everybody who works in this space, and even students, nobody wakes up wanting to go to a failing school.
Right.
A parent doesn't want to send their kid to a failing school. The tension you hear in this room and the tension you see in the community is supply and demand. The goal in this city is turning into now, how do we have enough quality seats for the demand? Novice, all the parents on
First of all, more quality schools mean quality seats.
Right. But we have a demand for A and B schools. We just don't have enough Edna cars out there. We don't have enough of the magnet schools. We have to have a plan 20 years to say every child that is of school age in this city should be in a quality seat. And we have to define what that is. And right now, the tension is you have 20,000 quality seats, but you have 60,000 kids. So the 40,000 that's left out, they're like, why can't I get in? Why can't I get in? It's wrong with one app. There's no transportation. I got to travel.
So the question I have, Henderson, Patrick, your superintendents, how are you going about the process of what is a true high-performing quality school, and how are you getting rid of those who are failing, who are not doing the job, and to your point, replicating those who are doing it right?
Good question.
We've done that a number of ways. So one thing I want to point out, in 2005, about 65% of RSD schools were F schools. Today is less than 7%.
Okay, first of all, how many schools are we talking about?
Today?
Yes.
That we have 57 schools, so less than 7% of those. So we're talking about just smaller than a handful.
Okay.
And one thing I want to point out is that...
Celeste, I'm going to get to you because you're shaking your head back there, but I'm going to get to you.
The biggest thing is about, listen to the debate that just was going on. Like, this wouldn't have happened 20 years ago in New Orleans.
Absolutely.
Because, and Dana hit it right on the head when he said, don't gloss over like supply and demand. It's like market-driven factors are coming to play in New Orleans in a good way. Not around financial, but around like what's quality and what parents want. And as Erica pointed out, succinctly to say, they're more selective consumers now. People who just took for granted, I have to go to the school around the corner, are now saying, do you have extended day programs that meet the needs of my child? What type of mental health services are you providing? We just opened up a therapeutic center. We're opening one in a couple of weeks in the city. What we're doing specifically, though, is that every charter, as I mentioned earlier, has an initial contract for renewal. If they don't meet the bar, we have not renewed a school in New Orleans that have not met the minimum academic standards or financial standards. And I don't say that like in some type of gloating way, because it was some very difficult decisions where schools were sometimes like 1 point away from making just the academic cut.
But are you doing this to his point here, though? Are you looking at the folks who are in your current system? Are you looking at their performance, and are you going to them and saying, you know what, you are doing what's right, we want to help you expand?
Absolutely. Well, they help themselves expand, because what charters do is they apply to the state or to Orleans Parish to replicate or to build more schools. So
no, I understand that, but I'm saying I get them applying. But what I'm saying is, as a superintendent, you're looking at that because there are some people who may say, you know what, I just want to stay where I am. But if they're doing the job, if you go to them and say, you know what, the way you are doing is the way we want to see it. So maybe if you only have a K through 1, we believe you need to do a K through 5.
Absolutely.
Are you having that kind of conversation?
Well, we have those conversations regularly. We constantly ask the ones that are producing well to say, look, we need you to replicate. One of the instances, he mentioned Carr, well, one of the schools that is in his network has just, whether it's their network has actually taken over an RSD school, Wilson Charter School, through a community process, and they were not an RSD school. They were not an RSD, but what it is, they were eligible to replicate under the Orleans Parish, and so we decided to say, hey, let's give them an opportunity to do school turnaround, and they're stepping into that, and parents are pleased that they have that, but we need more high-quality options, and we're talking to our operators and want them to replicate.
Before I go to Henderson, Celeste, you were shaking your head as Patrick was talking.
Well, a couple of things. One, in terms of replicating what works, many of the A schools are selective admission schools, and so there's never going to be a way to have
so
a
when you
system.
say selective admission schools, selective admission schools under which district? Both?
Just
OPSB. They're just OPSB.
Okay, so you say you say there are selective admission schools under OPSB.
There are no A schools in the RSD. So the A schools are in the OPSB, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them are selective admissions. They require a test, they require a meeting, they require a whole variety of things that parents have to do to get their kids into those schools, and they have very few spots. And so if you're looking at how to replicate what's working, well, you can't replicate a system where you're excluding the vast majority of students. And so that's one of the issues. And the reason I was shaking my head is we only have 7 F schools in the RSD. I mean, part of that is
7%.
What did you say, 7% or 7?
7%.
Oh, I misunderstood you then. I thought you said 7 schools, because the bar for an F school has shifted numerous times in terms of how that is found. And so when people talk about how many F schools and A schools and F schools that we used to have, it's a bit like apples to oranges.
Henderson, I want to pick up on that point. The selective schools, are they magnets?
Some of them are magnet, but they have admission criteria.
Okay, what kind of magnets are they?
Academic magnet schools.
Okay, so like, is there a particular, like for instance, I went to a school of communications. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a magnet school. Mm-hmm. In Houston, we had foreign language, we had engineering, we had petrochemical, we had aerodynamics. Those are all area-specific magnet schools. Mm-hmm. And so these magnet schools, so who can get into these schools?
Well, families have the opportunity to have their students fill out the application as well as to take the test. And then there is a process to determine, who, based on their scores, who will get those seats. I will say that we don't have enough of those seats here in the city. But also, as we talk about OPSB and Orleans Parish School Board, yes, we have schools with admission criteria, and yes, those schools are A schools, but we also have schools that are part of the Orleans Parish School Board where it's high performance schools where it's open enrollment just like some of the schools in the RSD.
Okay, but the question I have though is under the Recovery School District, do you have any schools that require you to take a test to have a meeting to get in?
No.
Okay, why do you have those schools?
Well, we had those schools here in the city even before Hurricane Katrina.
Right, and I'm asking, why do you have those schools? Because
selectivity.
Huh?
I mean, he won't answer this.
No, but he's going to have to answer the question. So, I mean, he can dance, but I need an answer.
That's tradition. Yeah.
Tradition.
It is tradition.
So what is it about those schools that people want to get in? What are they doing at those schools that they want to go to those schools? What are they doing that's different from the other schools?
Well, first of all, you're taking a test to get in, and so you will have many times as students enroll. Of course, you will have students that traditionally are on grade level, coming into the school are above grade level, and so you're actually having a certain type of student that's in that particular school, and so that has been a part of the tradition. I'm not saying that that this is right or wrong.
What I'm saying though is, if people are applying to get into those schools, is it all based upon those being, I guess, the smartest students in the city, or do you have better resources? Do you have teachers at those particular schools who have master's degrees? Do you have teachers' aides? What are you doing at those schools that are A schools and you could be replicating elsewhere?
You can't replicate those schools. You'd have to replicate the parents. You would have to replicate the systems that many of these kids come from. I went to Ben Franklin High School. I went to that high school in 1987, and I sat next to kids who went to private schools their entire lives. So you can't replicate Ben Franklin and Lake Forest charter schools because they're just selective admission schools. They've been that way.
One second. Go ahead.
So is there teachers? Are there like quality teachers, or the students are quality? Like the students have like the
It's
right quality.
quality
Other students
students.
are,
It's a difference.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that's wrong. And the reason why I believe that's wrong because you're taking the great students to make your school look good. And I think that's when it comes down to reputation. And I don't think that's a fair deal. I think that you need to take students that are like not doing so well and put them students in really good schools to help them improve themselves instead of taking all the good students. And I think like Psy Academy. Psy Academy.
1 second, go ahead.
I'm be honest, Psy Academy, I went to Psy Academy. I was a student. I was illiterate at 14. And so I was illiterate until 14. So, and what I had to do is I had to catch up. And a school like Psy Academy took a student like me and took a chance with me.
Right.
And what Psy Academy did was they improved me. And I think that is a good school. I think that school right there needs more like publicity. And I think that we need to replicate those kind of schools because those kind of schools, they have rules and regulations.
They're about to take over 3 schools
They
in
have
Baton Rouge.
discipline, and the students come out, and the teachers are really well. They have quality teachers, and they deal with the students that are not doing so good. Now you got schools that are like really good A schools. The reason why they're doing so well because the students, they have everything together. They went to great schools when they were kids. They went to I don't know. They had like really good household, like family, rules and regulations. But you have students that don't come from backgrounds like that, and you look at like the schools they go to, they're having a really tough time. And it's not because it's the student's fault. Yeah, I believe it's the parents and the teacher's fault. But I think that like those students need to be given the opportunity to go to quality schools like that to learn more and to have like this sort of better chance to go to college. And I think like zip code. That doesn't really determine leadership and excellence, creativity. I think that like all that does is it keeps the student back. Why are you testing me? Why do you need to test me in order for me to get into your school?
Jaron, I want to pull you in on this. You agree or disagree?
I agree. From a student's perspective, charter schools, once you're there, you have a choice. You have the choice to be successful or not be successful. Being a student who was in a charter school, I think is very important to who I have become. But my 10th grade year in high school, I almost failed. But I did a turnaround. I took advanced classes. I took college courses while I was in high school. I think I'm one of the most notable graduates of my high school. And I think the problem is not the schools, because the schools are giving us what we need to be successful. I think the biggest problem is the students and the parents. I think the parents, instead of talking about how bad this may be, they should instill positive things into these kids' minds and teaching them that take advantage of what you have. And we have the opportunity to do what we want. We just have to take advantage of it.
I think people just don't like change. I think they don't like new rules coming in. I think that they don't like new people coming in. They think that they're taking over. I think that, kids need exposure. They need exposure from people all around the world. And yeah, we do need diversity. I don't think that I want to all African-American school. No, I don't want that. I want like a white school, a black school, like with black teachers, Asian teachers, African teachers. It doesn't matter. We're learning this education. There's no color on education. And I think that's when we sort of get lost in this argument and this conflict.
Go ahead.
Before Katrina, I had the opportunity to attend Edna Carr Magnet School then. And then after the storm, it had turned into a 9 through 12 traditional high school. So when Katrina hit, I was in 8th grade, and I had the opportunity to go back to Carr, which was not a magnet school, after Katrina. And I want to say that the students that were there before the storm and the quality of students they have now are different, but they're taking students from where they are, meeting them where they are, and growing them and shaping them, giving the opportunity to grow. I was able to have the opportunity to go to Tuskegee University on a full ride.
So what he's talking about, though, is in New Orleans, we talk about selective admission, but the real big whammy in the room is really private schools. We have a tradition of middle-class people upper class people sending their kids to private schools. And those working class, middle class folk who really can't afford it, they created magnet schools. They have their enclaves where they can feel that they're part of the public system, but still having levels of exclusivity. No, and I understand that and get that. But there's a lot of inequities that are created when you have a system where everybody has to put their name in a hat in a lottery, except for the high-performing schools that everybody wants to go to, and it's like, prove yourself.
That was
really
my point.
prove.
Every
Don't
parent on this stage wants what's best for their child. Every parent wants what's best for their child.
Let's go back to pre-Katrina. Pre-Katrina, yes, we had those high-performing schools. Pre-Katrina, like Andre said, not only middle-class families, but families who had to take a loan to send their child to a private school. In 1980, we had...
And they were doing that because why?
But wait a minute. In 1980, we had over 100,000 students enrolled in New Orleans public schools. By the time Katrina, enrollment was down to 60-something thousand. A result of that was we were failing. Did we recognize that? I think, yes, we were beginning to recognize that. Unfortunately, as Andre said, we are at the bottom. So you can't expect 10 years later for us to be at the
But
top.
here's my whole point. If you said you had 100,000 people who were you had 100,000 available people.
Right.
100,000
Enrolled in
available
schools.
students, okay? Then you go down to 60. That means that 40,000 were going somewhere else.
Right,
Okay.
to private
There's a reason
schools.
40,000 were going somewhere else. And if you are a taxpayer, you are paying taxes that are funding a
Absolutely.
school, but you're also having to pay out of pocket.
Absolutely, and that's the point. We were failing, and families were leaving this system for a better education. And yes, they were going across town. They were taking loans to go to better schools. And then, unfortunately, we did have the top-performing schools, and those schools remain filled. Not enough seats. So what does the family do? They pay to go to school.
You're really good, right? And this is because I always love when people engage in the conversation of 1 or 2 or 3 schools that what I call cherry pick and put their kids in there. I mean, look, if I can get everybody on the 9th on level or 10th or 11th, 12th grade level coming in, that would be awesome. But realistically, if I took a chance and if the school in itself said, you know what, we want to have open admission and prove that we're not only apples to apples, but apples to oranges and still outperform our counterparts, that's true success. That's not selecting people who are in the 2-lane area or who actually have kids who have both parents in the household. We have to measure apples to apples and not apples to oranges. My kids are coming in, and most of our kids are coming in single-parent household in a high crime-infested area and are expected to show up and just pass the dead bodies. Show up and deal with mom who haven't been home in 3 days, who have a substance abuse problem. Or here's one that people forgot because it's 10 years later, still show up and have PTSD and don't have quality social workers, counselors, or nurses in their schools, have part-time folk in their school trying to deal with a full-time problem. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bazooka wound.
So I want to ask you this, because it really does go to this whole idea of choices in terms of our available school. How many of you agree with having selective process? How many of you agree with having schools where it's selective, where if to get into that school you have to take a test to be able to get in?
Or elementary school?
No, doesn't matter. Or do you want a totally open enrollment across the board in Orleans and recovery? You want totally open. Why?
I feel like we should have a total open school system for the simple reason all kids deserve a quality education. It does not matter where you come from. It does not matter if it's a single family home or if the mom or dad has 10 kids. Every child deserves a high quality education. And I don't think that certain schools should make a child take a test just so that they can get into school. It's not fair.
Yeah, that's not fair. And I think that, like, if we are the future and we're going to be working together, like you got to put all of the kids together, you know, whether they are smart, they are not as smart as the smart kids, you got to put them together because they have to work together. And I think the reason why the crime is so high because the kids are like divided. You know, the kids can't really help each other and they can't really talk to one another because they think they're different. One kid thinks he's smarter than the other kid. So this kid gives up on school and he winds up like turning to drugs, turning to violence. And that same kid that is smart in that classroom and that's going to come back to his neighborhood to try to improve it, that kid, yeah, maybe he will improve some of it, but the kid who are not so smart will wind up killing that other kid because he's dealing with problems. And I think that's the issue. We sort of like oust out those like kids that are not so smart, but those are the kids that we have to worry about because they're like, you know, doing this violence. Some of them are like in jail, incarcerated, and you know, we just sort of like give up on them. And I think that like if we continue to do that, we'll continue to have this violence. Kids will continue to be divided, and we won't be able to work with each other because we're so separated.
You disagree? You say keep selective process.
I disagree because I think that there is more than enough space in our city and our community for different types of schools with different types of missions. I do believe in my heart that we have space in this city for selective admission schools because it's not just the students that make those schools what they are. It is truly a community, a family. There's a lot of rigor placed on families. There's a lot of rigors placed on families in all schools. But to Harold's point and to the gentleman's point, I sit on the Collegiate Academies Board, which runs Psi Academy and Carver Collegiate and Carver Prep. They do miracles at that school, but they do miracles with certain types of kids. Ben Franklin, Lake Forest, Lusher, Hines, those schools are selective admission schools for certain types of families that exist in this city. You just can't ignore those schools and those parents that want to send their kids to those schools. But when you compare data, to Harold's point, be fair in the data you could compare because selective admission schools have an asterisk versus open enrollment. A true success of a school is taking someone like Psi Academy when they first opened, taking some ninth graders who are reading on fourth grade level and getting half of them graduates from high school with top scholarships to LSU. That's success, but it doesn't mean that we have to throw away selective admission.
I want to bring it up, I want to go to Jonathan as well. Go ahead.
I feel like this, as a parent, certain schools, I feel like this, you have a right to protect the integrity of your school. I feel like selective testing is good because as a parent, I want my child to be around a certain caliber of kids. Every child does deserve a good education. Well, my son was at a school where they had inclusion in the classroom, and if your teacher is sitting here dealing with the other issues, how is my child who's advanced being able to be catered to? He's becoming stagnant now because he's bored. That's and when he comes home to me, he's like, I can't do anything because the classroom was disruptive. So then I don't have a problem. I work with him, right? But he's not getting what he needs to get because you're catering to all the other madness.
I agree.
I want to go to Jonathan. Hold on one second. I want to go to Jonathan. 1 second.
I think in part that this is a false choice. I think we have a climate now post-Katrina that is more welcoming of people like myself creating new charter schools, new opportunities that are built on the premise that we don't currently have a portfolio of school that reflects the breadth and depth of need that our parents and that our children have.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think that they should have a few selective schools in the community, but I think when she said the certain caliber of students, I think she meant students who are academically inclined, whose parents did attend college. I went to a school that I didn't have any admission requirements, but I don't know what level grade it is, if it's an F school, D school, C school, but what I do know is 100% of the scholars who attended that school, all of them got accepted to college. And I think that's
now tell me this, is this actually happening and how are you dealing with it? Are folks stashing slots?
Yes.
All right. Are they
unequivocally yes?
Are they having invitation-only deals?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So how you say yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. How is that being dealt with in these two districts?
One app. Every school needs to be a part of a common enrollment system to open up their admissions process. Not change their criteria, but they need to open up their admissions process. Right now, it looks like we have a tale of two cities. You have selective admission schools that conduct their own application process, and you have the other schools that are part of common enrollment.
So who uses one app? So recovery?
All of the recovery.
All recovery? Does Orleans use one app?
One app and a separate process for some of the other schools.
Selective admission.
Okay, one second, go ahead.
There's some non-selective schools that don't have a test to get in who are not a part of the One App. And the two systems, the RSD schools and the OPSB schools, do have different agreements about their participation in the One App. So RSD schools, for example, at my school, if a student gets placed at my school and they've been retained, I have to find a space for that student. In the Orleans Parish schools, even if they participate in One App, and some of them don't, they don't have to take a student who's retained, and they don't have to take a student who has D's or F's on the report card. They can contest the promotion of a student coming out of a different district. So I think that it makes sense for us all to have the same rules. There might be space in our
So
district
you
for
want
selective
both
schools.
districts to have One App.
Who have open enrollment schools should have the same rules.
Who agrees with that? Raise your hand. Who agrees with that? Raise your hand.
Common enrollment.
Okay. Okay, Henderson, you agree with that?
I do.
So do you? You laughing over here. So all right, go ahead.
I clearly believe in a common enrollment system. The Orleans Parish School Board passed a resolution that upon renewal that our schools that are not part of the common enrollment system will be a part of it. But also what we're doing at this time, I actually came on board in March, but what we're doing right now, we're working on our charter policy right now and working on how to, because some of my schools that are not a part of it right now, they have wait lists, they have a different process, and so what we're doing is we're working collaboratively with the Recovery School District so that we can work on co-governing, even though I have schools in it, but we're working so that we can co-lead the whole piece of the common enrollment system, and also to have my schools to be a part of it, but also to look at it in such that it meets the needs of the entire city. So yes, I clearly believe in the common enrollment system.
Okay, the most resistant people to a common application part of his system for a reason.
Right.
But it goes to this.
Why?
Because there is a need to
control
control their
control
populations, because it's easier to get success when you know the students you're getting. The problem in New Orleans, and it goes to your point, we actually do need magnet schools, but they should not be based on class or the color of your skin, or even your academic past. It should be based on themes. We have one true magnet school that's an art-based school.
So when you say theme, again, I mean, I came from the Houston Independent School District, where we have 30, 40, 50 magnet schools. It is based upon career.
Absolutely. So when you look at, if you're into sciences, there is no one race that loves sciences. You should see a very diverse community of scholars who gravitate around science. If you look at art, but when you look at some of the schools in the Orleans Parish School District, there's some of our whitest schools. Now, that's not saying that they're extremely white, but our whitest schools are schools that claim that they are an art-based school. It's like blacks are not involved in art.
So Henderson, if I'm hearing this, if you have folks who are opposed to One App, why?
I'm gonna say for a parent.
Well,
one second.
Some may say it's control. Some may say that it's because a lot of my schools right now that are not part of One App were some of the first schools to actually come back, which really doesn't have much to do with anything.
Which is utterly irrelevant.
Right, but feel that they restarted education in the city. However, again, as far as the school board is concerned, as well as myself as superintendent, we respect a common enrollment system, and we're moving in the right direction to bring all of our schools to be a part of that common enrollment system.
Go ahead.
And I do respect that decision. The question is how long will that take? I mean, if that is a process by which they will move into the common enrollment at the time of their renewal, some of those schools have been renewed already, and it'll be 5 to 10 years before they're up for renewal. So you have a whole generation plus.
So your contracts are 5-year renewals. How long are yours?
Some schools receive a 10-year renewal.
Why?
I can't answer that. That was there in place prior.
No, but I asked you as a superintendent, that's a hell of a long contract.
Yes.
Does that make sense, or should it be a smaller contract? Because a 10-year contract, I mean, that's a long time.
Some of them, though, are based off of performance. So even the state. So we have some that when your subsequent renewal, your initial is for 5 years in the RSD, and then subsequent renewals, if you moved up to, say, a B letter grade, we might give you 6 years or 7 years.
No, I'm
the schools that with OPSB is what they're saying.
got these four
Right.
select admission that's been
It
around
will be
for
a while.
years.
You're right. It will be a
They
while.
have- It will be.
21.
So why?
Yes.
So that does nothing. That does nothing. That the school board should take the position that it needs to be immediate. The next school year.
And so obviously based upon, again, the vibe I'm picking up, this one app issue is a major sticking point for a lot of people.
But it should be, we should.
Well, no, not for a lot of people.
Well, hold on.
For a few schools.
First of all, when one app came up in this room, all y'all were like, hey, I mean, that saying one app changed the whole tenor in this room as well. So let's just be honest. Go right ahead. Hold on 1 second. Go ahead.
It's a holdover from the old system where we really believed that the students made the school excellent and not the teachers and the administration or the system. And so I think the introduction of the RSD and the work that all of us do in schools is all about how we believe every child can succeed, and we think the school makes a difference. And some of the schools that are having a hard time changing, I think, are holding on to this old way of believing that the way to get your school to be excellent was to control the kids that came to it, as opposed to doing things when they came there. And I think we've moved on from that as a city, and there are some folks that are having a hard time changing it. I think change is really hard, like Troy said.
It is hard, but one app has been one good thing that happened to the city in terms of making helping parents become more informed as to what's available. Now, are there flaws with it? Yes, with most things we can improve. But if we bring the other schools in, and we talk about the selected magnet schools, they don't provide transportation. So I could have a really smart kid, such as this parent's kid, who lives in the 9th Ward and not have a car.
And okay, selected magnets. That's under which school system?
OPSB.
Okay, and you don't provide transportation.
Most of them, huh?
We have 4 schools that, when you look at traditional yellow bus transportation, it is not done in the manner of even the majority of the other schools that I have that are Paulie Orleans Parish School
Right.
Board.
All right.
So we are required to, so let's say this parent didn't have a car and her kid actually tested and got into school. Then he's denied access because of transportation. Whereas we are required to provide transportation, and also RSD does a really good job, and I worked with RSD at the inception of one app. We had many parents calling, what school do I go to? All the schools are failing. Now there is one mechanism where you can go and there's a parent publication where you can look at every school's performance and make your choice.
One of the biggest criticisms that I get from people all around on social media when it comes to my support of school choice and charters and every form, they say, yeah, but they always leave out special needs. What is happening in this city in terms of special needs students? Where are they going? Where schools? Are they able to go to any school? No. Are they being excluded?
Well, in the RSD, we have over 12% of students on average in RSD schools are students with special needs. We've created in New Orleans in the RSD a differentiated funding formula. What that means is that students with disabilities that have significant disabilities, we tier the funding. So we give more money to kids, the severity of their disability, the more funding they get. Instead of in just about every other school district in the state, they do like equal funding to schools. And so therefore you can have a kid with severe autism, but they're getting the same amount of money with kids that might not have autistic kids. And that's not equitable. So what we've done is set a model of a tiered funding formula. This year we added students that are English language learners, so English as a second language, because we have a number of Latino students that have come to the city, particularly last year. Another thing we're doing, we have an exceptional needs fund that we created with a cooperative endeavor agreement with the Orleans Parish School Board last year. That's basically a pool of money for students with the most significant disabilities. So if a child needs to use a van to get from his home with an aide that has to sit with him every day, we've put a pool of money together in the city that helps to offset the cost for the schools. Another big thing that we're doing around special ed is to make sure that we just have diversity in programming. And what you see happening is that some of the basics, kids having like individualized education plans, which we call IEPs, that are written to a level where it's like satisfactory for families. We see a lot of schools are doing such a better job at that then families by word of mouth start gravitating and say, hey, we want to go to this school. And then the numbers increase. And then it becomes even more difficult for the schools to try to manage just because they're doing just a decent job that you're supposed to be doing, right? And so what happens is that we look at it, what we're doing in New Orleans, particularly in RSD schools, and we're trying to work well with OPSB, is like we're trying to create what we're calling the equity floor. Like there should be basic things that are non-negotiable that every school, if you're receiving public dollars, whether it's through a scholarship program, whether it's through, if you have magnet programs, or if you're just open enrollment like all of our schools are, that these are things that are non-negotiable. Open access for enrollment, transparency for all your rules and processes. That we're going to serve kids with with all disabilities. We're going to serve them well. We're going to make certain that we have the funding to go forward to help do that. And then transportation. If you live more than a mile, we should follow the law. That's for traditional public schools, and we require that in RSD and build out towards that. And so it's been about an evolution of working with schools to make these things happen.
I got to ask you, are you going to move in that way, requiring that kind of transportation? Because if they're operating on one rule and you're operating on a different one, when it comes to transportation, shouldn't that be the same?
Transportation should be the same.
Will it be the same?
I will say this at this point. We are actually working on our schools that currently are not providing transportation. I'll use like Lake Forest Charter School, for example. That's a part of their program that they have. And so we have families that travel from the West Bank to the East Bank that make that choice. They have a morning gathering where families and parents participate in that. But also we're looking at for students that get into those schools that we're currently not providing transportation for those schools, finding ways for those students to also be able to be transported to be a part of those schools as well. Okay. Superintendent Dilbart also mentioned about the funding. Well, right now in our city, what we're doing, we're all going to be coming together to be able to work on a common funding formula that's going to be for the city. So even though right now on OPSB, we may have the same funding formula like the majority of the districts in the state, which may differ from currently what the RSD is doing. However, we are about to go to the table to work on a standard funding formula that's going to be used for our city.
But what you're hearing is there are some areas in this decentralized arena that should not go to the school, because in some cases a school doesn't have the fiscal capacity to deal with low incident special needs kids, to deal with some of the transportation issues.
So there are some things that should be centrally centralized.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what you're hearing is we're still trying to figure this out. When should a superintendent be a little bit more authoritative, and when should they back off? Clearly, what we've learned in New Orleans, superintendents should back off of curriculum instruction. Let that to the school. But the transportation costs are going out of the roof.
Right.
Yes. Special needs, although we're making strides, we've got to do something that's fundamentally different and central.
Because it's interesting, as you were talking, I mean, again, I went to Magnet High School, but I remember the route that I took. There were students who got on that bus who also went to traditional schools. And so you have the possibility of shared resources when it comes to transportation.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things, like with transportation, in a sense, when you think about if all schools in New Orleans agreed that they will go into like a unified process to help really literally drive down the cost. Like we're going to have one vendor in the city. Right. That is like the ideal nirvana in how you would go about doing that. And that way you might share routes. Some schools do that. A lot of the charters in RSD, they partner. So Samette and her organization might partner with another charter network on transportation. I think, in two other areas you asked about kids with special needs. I'll do one we're talking about right now, again, to what Andre just said, as far as when we see a need come up, we're opening up a therapeutic setting in 2 weeks in the Recovery School District for students with significant behavioral disorders. And that came from, you get a kid that's in a school, he has extreme behavioral problems, he gets put into another school, and they kind of we know the kids, and it's like maybe 24 of those kids. So we realized we don't have a therapeutic setting in this city anymore because of the large cuts that we've taken for healthcare over the last several years. And so now we're implementing that. We had an expulsion problem, where we saw kids were being expelled, some for egregious offenses, others for what we might deem minor offenses. And what the charter leaders did, they policed themselves. Right. They said, look, we need a common process around expulsions, and we need common definitions around expulsions in order to do our work better and have a better system.
You mentioned this whole issue in terms of that if you will, that wellness, what did you call
Therapeutic
it?
side.
Therapeutic. And Harold, you mentioned something earlier, and so before I get to the what's next in terms of what needs to be, how do you move forward? I believe folks in education have been played and pimped by politicians. And here's what I mean by that. What I mean by that is schools have now turned into community service centers. So when you mention PTSD, when you mention social workers and things along those lines, I think a lot of politicians have said, great, perfect, which means that education really is the fifth and the sixth thing that's happening in a school, but you're dealing with dental, health, you're dealing with social, you're dealing with are they eating, and you haven't even gotten to whether or not they can read or write. That's right. So the question I have for you, in this city, are you forcing political leaders, forcing city leaders, county leaders, state leaders to say, no, no, no. In the school, we only want to be focused on one thing, education. You need to open the community service centers and not try to transition these schools into community service centers or sort of these wraparound services. Is that coming up here?
There's no reason.
No, I don't see where politicians are forcing that down. I think I see real leaders looking at their population, meeting them where they are, and saying that, okay, little Johnny and Jane, Tyrone, if you would, is absolutely in a position where he can excel, but he has some physical ailments that is standing in his way. And so in the past, in the traditional model, that may have worked then, but after Katrina, it exposed a lot of other things that New Orleans never had a quality sense of mental health and physical health. So that was on the back burner, if you would. And this is just no different in any other city or state where, you know, where grandparents share their medication with other family members because of cost. I think when
but here's what I'm saying. You're an educator.
Right.
Okay. You want your whole job to be the moment that kid shows up on educating that child. Okay, so when you sort of have this push to have wraparound services in our schools, what happens is your primary focus all of a sudden goes down. Teachers all of a sudden are so focused on all the other stuff, and education is always further down the list.
I'm not saying, and listen, I want to say this very clearly, nobody's forcing anything down my throat. I choose to make sure that kids are met where they're supposed to be, not where we want them to be. And so for me, it's personal because I went through a traditional education system and saw a lot of kids fall through the crack who weren't labeled, who were labeled as bad kids, and we didn't have pills back then. Right. In fact, you had a physical approach to education that corrected a whole lot of problems back then.
You mean paddling?
I'm not even. Because
no, you ain't gotta try to dress it up. I mean, trust me, my parents asked for the form. Right. And I couldn't even hide it. Right. So I know about getting paddled.
So what I'm gonna say is, you know, when I graduated in '92, I did a tour of this city and was labeled a bad kid, had no medication. The real issue was my dad and my mom was trying to work out that whole parenting thing and didn't do well at it. I had a phenomenal leader, Philman Edwards, who was an assistant principal at Warren Easton, who was an Omega, who told my mom, I remember this, saying, I've looked at his record, he's done a tour of some of the worst schools and got put out of those schools. So I know you probably had a tough time with employment. I can correct it all in a stroke. And I remember that.
So you got lit up.
And so
I understand. No, I understand.
I remember I remember my mom kissing me and saying, I'm gonna see you later. And I was freaked out, right? But I thank that man, rest his soul, because I had a lot of educators and teachers who didn't go the extra mile to find out what was going on and listen to me very carefully. It was simple as listening to me of what was going on in my household and then adjusting my behavior and recognizing I needed a consistent model of what appropriate behavior looks like. And so, although I couldn't stand him for 2.5 years, I grew to love him and appreciated the fact that he listened. And one thing about wraparound services, when you see where there is an ailment or you see where there's a deficiency, in our schools and in my school in particular, we have to teach, but I have qualified mental health professionals to meet that need. I have created behavior interventionists, which are mentors, which are pulling kids out, getting them back on track and getting them right back in that class to learn,
Well,
right?
I tell you what, only bad thing was he wasn't an alpha. That's all I say there. Hold on, well, I will take a quick poll. How many of y'all would love to see corporal punishment returned back in schools?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but
You down with it?
that'll get
Y'all
some
down
people
with it?
killed.
That'll
get some
light
people,
a kid. Let me
because
tell you something.
parents don't want their children beat.
I don't care what y'all say. The roughest teacher I had was Mrs. Crawford. Did nobody met, because she could wheel that paddle better than any dude in the school.
Those nuns at Catholic school.
You're not going to beat these kids into submission nowadays. There's no freedom.
That's what they said about my 6 nieces.
No, but
Go
seriously,
ahead.
with wraparound services, I think we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because schools have to be community anchors as well. And so when you heard this young man earlier talk about employment rates and crime rates in the city and things like that, when you talk about schools serving in a larger capacity than just providing academic services, not only to the child, but the inclusion of the entire family.
But see, that's why I disagree, because here's what has happened. We used to have community service centers. We had community service centers that served that purpose. And so what happened was they got rid of community service centers, and then politicians said, oh, we'll just put it all in the school, but didn't shift the resources in the school to go with it.
I don't think we disagree there.
I think what educators ought to say is, hey, guys, you need to go ahead and reopen the community service centers so when they come in, we can say, go right there.
Well, look, as the Urban League, obviously I agree with that. But I'm going to say that. But also, though, when you need parents to be partners in the education of their child, I do think that there is an opportunity and an appropriate time for the inclusion of additional services.
I agree. But what I'm speaking of, I want some of the teachers in here, because this is where I want to hear from the teachers. Because you're being asked to be a teacher, be a social worker, be a healthcare worker, be a dental worker, and so so I'm hearing from teachers saying, look, I can't even do what I'm supposed to be here to do because I got to do all of that.
But it's very difficult also for teachers to do that in a day when you have Johnny coming to school, or Tyrone, as you relate to, that is coming in that may have had a traumatic experience the night before, or may not have eaten breakfast, or his mom may have worked 3 jobs and coming home and he's just got to get out the door.
I understand, but again, I think as education advocates and reformers, we have to demand of political leaders. You cannot get off easy and stop thinking the school is the answer to every single issue in a community.
So can I'm the only recovering politician in the room.
You're in rehab, huh?
And I don't, from the state of Louisiana's perspective, I mean, we didn't sit around a room trying to push these wraparound services in the schools. What we heard from educators and from teachers and from parents and all of the above is that they needed them.
And why do they need them?
Because they needed them to be right where they were.
But why do they need them? Because you had community centers that were shut down.
In Louisiana, you had a governor that literally did away with mental health services.
Right. And the reason I'm raising the point is because I think as educators, it's very easy to say, yes, bring it all in, but do understand the people on the front line also saying, no, wait a minute, you're now shifting what I'm here to do. I'm saying as education advocates, we also be very careful to say, now hold up. If you pull all that in, it's also the responsibility to have other places where they can go, because when that becomes the be-all to end-all, you still get away from what your primary purpose is.
And I think one of the things, and the great thing
Here
about
than here.
the teachers we have in the city is that their resiliency and their commitment to just taking on whatever's necessary. So I think from a Louisiana and particularly a New Orleans perspective, we hadn't faced that type of pressure, Roland, to be quite honest, that you might be seeing in other parts of the nation. Our healthcare system has been woefully inadequate, particularly around schools, for so long that expectation now I don't think is even there.
Because y'all got to make do.
We got exactly. And
you're like, look, all right, we're just going to go ahead and just do this.
And then I think the realness, too, of this also and the seriousness out of Katrina, we have so many kids that not only dealt with post-traumatic stress from Katrina, they deal with post-traumatic stress from living just in a very violent time city. And so with that, you see schools, and I can remember as a classroom teacher, I embraced, 25 years ago, I embraced that, you know what, I got to be mama, daddy, I got to be the good educator, I got to be disciplinarian, because they don't have it all the time. But I think what we find today is that our school leaders, because we're so decentralized and focus is in the individual school buildings, charters in the different schools make those adjustments. They're not putting it all on the teachers.
Right.
So the teachers might not even see that. So I know one school, Crocker School here in New Orleans, in Mid-City, Uptown area, they do yoga every day for the kids. That's not something that was mandated or you had to wrap around. It was like, our kids need something to help them sort of relax, and they have a high stress area.
They'll do it.
And that was something that would do it. And so that's the type of intervention we had.
Real quick.
I wanted to say I agree with what you said about having the community centers to deal with those other problems. But in the time like right now, when the education system in New Orleans is doing so bad, I believe like if we had teachers that really understand the fact that most of the students in the city are in poverty, or, we went through Katrina and some of the kids weren't there for Katrina, but they're dealing with the after effects of it. If we had teachers that understood, where the city stands socially, economically, politically in those areas and could teach those children that, I believe it would be more beneficial. And I also want to say, I want to say that because like I just taught at a summer camp for the past few weeks, and my hardest problem with teaching the kids was the fact that they could all dance, they could, do things that had to do with their physical, part of their body. But when I asked them to do something that caused them to think, you know what I'm saying, it was a lot harder. That was something that was boring. They didn't want to do that, you know what I'm saying? And they're dealing with the after effects of Katrina, things that are not good now. They weren't nowhere around when Katrina hit. But, the city right now is everything is up for grabs. Everything is pretty much questionable.
One of the things that we always look at in terms of these issues is, what happens next? What do we do? And we've sat here for the last hour and a half and also talked about what they see are problems, what they see are issues. And so here's your opportunity to say, you got to pick one thing that you want to see fixed, repaired, adjusted, done away with, added, that will improve the state of education in this city, that will benefit the children. Everybody got to come up with one. So some of y'all ain't said much. That's fine. Some of you have talked a lot. So I want to know one thing. You got two superintendents right here. And so you can put it on the record right now and press them, such as we're going to double check when it comes to that one app, when it comes to transportation and stuff along those lines. So what's your one fix? Who wants to start first? Go.
Have a default option on the one app.
A default option on the one app. What does that mean?
That there are, you rank 8, your top 8, and not everybody ranks 8. Most people don't rank 8. And then if you don't get one of those schools, then the algorithm decides where you're going to go to school. And maybe there could be some sort of default option so that if you don't get the choices that you want, you go to the nearest best rated school to where you live, or something like that.
All right, that's a good one. Who's next? Yes.
The one app, my problem, I think that they should,
we don't want problem, we want your solution.
My solution with the one app is they have seat availability, but they don't say the number of seats that are available in the school. It just
so you want like a plane?
Yes, it says, well, no, not a plane. It says
no,
like,
when you look on there, you say there's 15 available seats.
Yes.
Don't want an exit seat, aisle seat, center seat.
It just says,
but you want to know the number of available seats.
Because, well, they didn't have it last one app, they just had the grade level.
You have it now?
Yes.
See, your problem's been fixed.
Last one it wasn't like that.
All right, your problem has been fixed. All right, go ahead.
And actually, our problem hasn't been fixed.
Okay.
It still tells you limited availability. Okay.
I need your one.
But it would be transparent equity, which
what does that
speaks
mean?
to that a parent can know exactly how many seats there are in a school that are available. That I know as an administrator of a school, that when you do the round robin process in one app, that I'm not getting all the kids, all the fourth graders that are coming to the city, and another school is not getting those students.
Find a way to deal with the dropout problem. This district still has the highest dropout rate in the state, the lowest graduation rate in the state, and part of it is because of the fractioning that you create when you have charter schools that don't talk to each other. And what happens is a kid leaves the school and he may not go to another school. And they need to find some way to track those kids and put them in school.
All right, what's next? Yes.
Stop incarcerating so many black men. I think it's one of the most under-talked about reason why schools don't perform.
But how are schools doing that? What's their role in that?
No, because we have political folks who should be talking about shrinking the size of the jail.
No. What I'm saying is, when the school system, are the schools participating in that school to prison pipeline?
No, I think they've corrected some of the things, but the issue I'm raising is so many men go to prison, and it's an informal educational system in itself.
All right, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think we ought to broaden the pathways that a student can take to financial freedom and independence. I think largely we have a single story that says that college is the only option that leads to success for students, whereas the majority of them will not graduate from college. And so I think we ought to just reimagine.
Do you mean more focus on vocational training?
Possibly.
Technical training?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
No, the reason why we actually had gains is because so many of the young folks in the city, when they came, they talked about college like you wouldn't believe.
Hold on. Why they talk about college?
Oh, because, to be honest with you, if you have a college degree, that's the only real way to substantially change your economic conditions.
And this is why you're wrong. And I'll give you an example. City colleges of Chicago. They had a shortage of people in the city of Chicago who could climb the utility poles. They were retiring at a rapid rate. They created a 9-month certification program with the community college. If you completed that program and got hired, starting salary $70,000. Top salary with overtime, $120,000. I believe part of the problem here that we've had is that we only have a college discussion when the reality is, follow me here, I get the point. I totally get it. But the reality is, when you look at a significant number of jobs in America, 65% of them are actually taught by community colleges, 2-year institutions. So what has happened is we have created a system in this country where if you actually want to even apply for a scholarship, it's nearly four-year schools, not even 2-year schools. And so I think to Jonathan's point, if you all of a sudden, if you tell somebody that, and matter of fact, in New Orleans, after Katrina, master electricians were making upwards of $150,000. There was some broke people with college degrees who were saying, man, if I knew how to connect some wires and fix some stuff. So I think what Jonathan is saying is you have to have a balanced education approach because every person won't go to college.
But if balance meant diversifying those fields with white people, I would get it. But white folks aren't going.
Guess what? You know what? Well, you know what? That's interesting because when I was reading the book about one of the guys who lived in Connecticut, one of the highest ranking neighborhoods in the country, Daddy was a plumber. Everybody else that neighborhood homes with $2 million. Daddy was white. All I'm saying is we make the mistake as African Americans when we fall into, hey, our kids being put on the track. Reality still is there are jobs that are vocational, blue-collar jobs.
I want to hear a cheerleader say, college is for us. We don't have that person.
Hold up. We can say college is for us, but you know what I want? I want you to have a job that's for us. And I'm saying, if there's a kid who doesn't want to go to college, but they can make $100 grand, bro, come on. Jonathan, go right ahead. Come on, bro. Don't act like those jobs don't exist. Hold up. When your toilet stop up, you gonna call a plumber. You ain't calling a lawyer. Go right ahead, Jonathan.
Unless the lawyer has turned contractor, which a lot of them did.
In New Orleans alone, over the next 5 years, thousands of jobs are opening in the digital sector, not to mention tons of other high-growth, high-wage industries. All I'm saying is, while we promote to a child, hey, go to college, and yeah, you may take on $40,000, $50,000 in debt, you should also consider this job in the digital sector, an entry-level 3D printer. Or entry-level software programmer that might pay 40, 50, 60K.
But a job doesn't say you shouldn't get a college degree.
Okay.
A job, that's a career choice.
But Andre, you have to be honest about debt that's associated sometimes and affordability of college. I think we have to expand the definition of what success looks like. No, you have to expand the definition of what success looks like because the reality is if you look at workforce trends, a 2-year degree is what's necessary for many of the demand sector jobs.
But when you go into a school in New Orleans, this is what you will see that you did not see 10 years ago. You will see Allegheny, Harvard, and people actually know. But I mean, I get it.
Either or.
But,
it's a both and.
But it is clear from professional degree, PhD, master's, bachelor, all earn more money over time.
There are lots
And
of
that- and-
technical.
A lot
more
of time,
debt.
overtime.
Overtime.
We have to have a
I've been an attorney for
comprehensive
15
discussion.
years. I got 3 jobs. I've been an attorney for 15 years. I'm upside down. To Erica's point, right? I went to Howard undergrad. I went to Southern University Law Center. And in this city, for a solo practitioner in New Orleans, we have to keep in mind, we got a 30% poverty level in this city. We have a city that's largely based on service industry, right? We don't have Fortune 500 company. We got one Fortune 500 company in this state. Entergy is it, really. We have to, in Harold's words, we have to meet the graduates
I don't
where
think
they
we have a
are.
Fortune 100 in this,
Right.
in this state.
So we can't say every kid's gonna go to college in a state where there's no jobs for them.
Now, here's the deal. I understand your reaction. Trust me, I've had this debate in numerous places. But I'm going to challenge you this here. I want you to go to the Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I want you to see, when they put out the monthly unemployment rate, I want you to see those sectors where they have the top 10 sectors where jobs were created. And in that same chart, it's going to show you over the next 5, 10 years. And what I'm trying to tell you is a significant number of those jobs are not the ones that you're talking about. Part of the problem that we've had in this country is that we have not had a balanced approach. What has happened is we have created through 3 generations, and if go without realizing that there are numerous jobs in America. Some require 4-year, some require 2-year, some require technical. The question is, that's all we're saying. We ain't saying don't go.
But hear me out. Hear me out.
And also, when you broke and don't have a job, you cool with that certification.
But those are career choices.
my
You can still go to college and
I got you. But when you never have the conversation, that's the mistake that we make. I need to get back to solution. What's your one?
I think that if we invest more money, I think the approach that we've taken in education specifically in Louisiana has been, let's invest in the back end. I think if we invest more money in the 0 to 4-year-old space in early childhood education, we put more money and resources in 0 to 4, specifically right now 3 and 4, we will see kids enter kindergarten ready to succeed. I know it sounds crazy.
But how do you deal with the issue, though, where you have kids who 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade are on par, but something happens in 4th grade, especially when it comes to Black, Hispanics, and whites?
Well, if you give them the resources that they need early on, their test scores are going to go up by the 3rd grade. You have to invest more on the front end. It's like building a house.
I understand.
It's the same concept. We're investing money on the back end. We should be investing more money in early childhood education.
What's your one?
I think that we need to add 2 hours onto school, like school period. I think that the longer students stay in school, they can learn more, they can socialize more, and they can have after-school activities, and even the parents can join in.
Drama.
And so
yes, I agree.
So no. I'm not talking about banning drama. I'm just talking about like
that's still education.
Learning about the history of that's still education. So like just learning about like the history of New Orleans, or like being in the manga class, and I think that would like stop the killing, the violence, kids getting into trouble. That'll like benefit so many parents and so many the kids.
What's your one?
My one is, I would say, a sense of unity when it comes down to RSD and OPSB. I think that's honestly...
You mean one school district?
Not even necessarily one school district, but one set of rules where there is a sense of alignment. I think there's so much tension, and nobody really has mentioned that, where there's always this confrontation that's his, like which one is better, which one is... I have kids that attended all. I can say great things and bad things about both systems. But it's more or less what's going to be better for that particular child.
Your one.
Let's invest in our staff. Teachers, historically across the country, don't make the wage as they do in other fields. And to attract the best, you need to pay more.
Erica, you want?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about the expanded economic opportunities that the new education landscape brings. And I think that, to her point about the source of tension in this community, that went to directly the teachers who were let go, and the economic, impact that had on the African American community. In the charter landscape, we have opportunities to have professional service contracts and to build wealth in the Black community in other ways. And so we need to talk more about DBE, disadvantaged business opportunity, enterprise opportunities, and other ways that we can grow wealth in the African American community.
Corinne, your one?
Special needs. With the 2 superintendents here, I think it's a great plan. My son attends a charter school, and they have it now to where at one point the children with special needs were just in those one particular classrooms. Now they have it to where they're teaming up with students that are up to par when it comes down to academics, and it's something called peer buddies. So that child with a special need, if they need any help or any assistance, not only do they have the teacher's undivided attention, but they also have that peer buddy to help them as well, because they're always left out.
As a second grade teacher, I believe we need more African American males in the lower grades. At my school, I'm the only lower grade teacher. Most of the black males are in middle school. So I believe our children need to see more African American males in the earlier grades.
Julie?
I think we need to stay the course on a lot of the decisions we've made around the structures in place and build more opportunities for equity in the city. So one app, everybody in the city being on the one app, transportation 100% across the board for every child in the city.
D'Amica?
Reduce the high turnover rate of school teachers.
Stacy?
Development of a black talent pipeline.
Black talent pipeline?
Yes.
Jariel?
I think we need like a behavior interventionist program at all schools. I like the idea of the therapeutic day program, but I think all schools need it.
Henderson?
The return of schools to the Orleans Parish School Board, so we can bring
all
in,
schools?
Yes.
Okay. Patrick?
More high quality high school options.
And?
Universal vouchers.
Universal vouchers based upon income or
No.
open to everyone?
Open to everyone.
Gotcha. Me and you gonna fight on that one. Harold?
So I believe you should replicate success. I think that if you are going to waste your money and invest in something that's not going to work, why don't we take the time and look at the things that are working and replicate it? It's not rocket science. Let's get the charter schools that are not so successful to work with charter schools that are very successful. And if that's not going to work, then I really believe you need to do away with those charter schools and replicate success, because our children aren't experiments and we don't have a do-over time. Right. Time is waiting for no one.
I would say that certainly when it comes to parents, whether they are two-parent households, one-parent household, the more information they have, the better. But also, I think one of the things that we don't do across this country, we are so, when it comes to education, we dance. And we're afraid to say what we want to say. We're afraid to challenge folks on their assumptions. And I think if there's one thing that we have to do, we have to absolutely make it perfectly clear to every single parent in this country. You cannot drop this child at school and think we are going to do it without your involvement. I have no problem with schools signing contracts with every single parent that says you want us to invest in your child, you got to invest in your child as well, and say we're all in this thing together or we're all going down together. Folks, I appreciate